So as I introduce our speaker, I just want to share a few introductory remarks with you. And there's a quote that I really like, and the quote is, "The voice of beauty speaks softly. It creeps only into the most fully awakened souls." Nietzsche said that. You know, there is no denying the greatness of America. I've got to travel a good part of the world, and I know many of you have as well, and I always tell people, we have won the historical lottery of all time to live when and where and how we do in the United States of America. We're not perfect. We got a lot we got to work on. We get it. But you really are blessed beyond compare to be part of this great country. You know, whether it be the muscle of the free market, the opportunities abounding, and the overflow of the unique innovation that American people bring to the world, they roll together to create a powerful, powerful nation. In addition to all of this, there is one distinct trait that allows us to move with wild freedom as Americans. And this is our individual voice. And I'm so grateful for all the individual, diverse voices that are out there. Our words, ideas, and thoughts have the power to harm or to help, to bring joy or to bring sorrow, and to allow beauty or regret to creep into our souls. I believe fully in our ability to truly influence a person's life simply by the words, tone, and the consistency of our individual voices. Tonight, we're honored to have a guest here who has done just that for years through sports. Baseball is a sport that ties the uniqueness of each of our voices together to create a strong America. As Lou Gehrig says, there is no room in baseball for discrimination. It is our national pastime and a game for all. And I'll underline the word all. In baseball, we see deep community ties created by bringing fans together in celebration of the significance that the sport has been marked with. There is no room for discrimination, but instead, each of our irreplaceable traits come together to form a game that is meant for everyone. It's a game that's also allowed for us to move as one, yet to still celebrate our individual differences. Throughout the years, there's always been a strong reverence for baseball broadcasters. For many years, that's the only way a lot of people ever got to see a game, because we didn't have this thing called TV. Their mark was truly one that symbolized the unique voice speaking for the good of the community. In the space provided to us to feel the joyous momentum of experiencing a sport that truly brings the American people together in unity, their voices help us to find our own by giving us one of hope, harmony, and happiness. That's why I'm thrilled to introduce Wayne Hagin to you tonight. Wayne has been an award-winning sportscaster and has been heard on ESPN and SportsCenter as the former voice of the Colorado Rockies, the New York Mets, and the St. Louis Cardinals. Wayne has been instrumental in bringing America their favorite pastime of baseball, while also sharing his unique voice for a variety of different football and basketball teams. He also shares his inspirational words by speaking with athletes and young people throughout the country and delivers motivational speeches to a wide audience. I also respect one other thing about Wayne. In 2012, the Denver Post focused on the fact that Wayne was known as putting his family first as the voice of the Rockies. How often time in business that we're not necessarily known for putting our families first before our profession. The interview noted that Coors Field will always be a type of baseball home to Wayne Hagin, but he notes his real home and family are more important to him. As a Mets announcer, he said, "I never got to go home and almost lost my family. My time with the Mets was like a 162-game road trip. It came down to what's more important, losing my family or coming home and starting over again." Wayne has definitely rounded the field, in my opinion, and since then has come home well into home plate. Please help me welcome Wayne to the front.
Well, first of all, I want to say thank you to Brian, who has been a great inspiration to me, and to Kyle Henderson. My goodness, what they have accomplished just with the Opportunity Coalition to see it grow as it has. And for them to actually ask me to come speak to you meant more than you'll ever know. And so you being present tonight, I appreciate it deeply. I hope there's some kind of nugget that comes out of this for you individually. It could be different things that I say, different stories. But I'm here to share a life story because as I think of entrepreneurs, I think about what I got to do because I was the kid at 18. Like if you and I went to high school together and you came and brought your yearbook and said, will you sign this, Wayne? I'd say, see you in the major leagues at age 24. I wrote it to everybody. The whole plan was to play at age 24. I went to San Diego State on a baseball scholarship and tore up my knee. But God said to me, go put 100% into your backup plan now. And that was broadcasting. And I started doing campus radio station broadcasts of San Diego State football, basketball, and baseball. I had a whole lot of experience when I graduated. And I can stand before you as I have so many schools. I've spoken to 400 schools in my wonderful, blessed time of being a baseball broadcaster because I understood it wasn't just the thrill of being able to call a different game each and every day. It was an ambassadorship. That job opened up doors for me to go into those schools and talk to the young people. And I'd stand in front of them and I'd put my arms like this and I said, you're looking at somebody who's never worked a day in his life. And they'd all laugh, but by the end of the speech, those young kids knew what I was talking about. So I see it with you. Passion. Passion for whatever it is. That's what every young person needs to find. They are so busy trying to find what it is I'm supposed to do instead of what makes me want to do it. And so I got to do baseball. I did almost 4,500 baseball games. Some great, and some not so great. I did a game here at Coors Field right down the street. It took 4 hours and 20 minutes for 9 innings of baseball. At that point, it's since been broken, but that was a National League record. 4 hours and 20 minutes, final score. Quentin McCracken had a pinch hit double, and the Rockies beat the Dodgers 16-15. I also got to call the only no-hitter, although they came close last week, but the only no-hitter in the history of that ballpark. And that was in September of 1996, a fellow by the name of Hideo Nomo. And I treated that particular day like it was special because it was memory-making. It could possibly be the only no-hitter ever thrown in that ballpark. It has stood the test of time since 1996. We'll have to wait and see. The difference now is that I can look back in retrospect and say, gosh, what a blessed life I've had. So tonight I'm here to share that with you. And I'll have a couple of topics. One is be grateful. I'm going to take you back to the 3rd grade. I'm a native. I grew up in Westminster. St. Anthony Hospital, the old one, is where I was born. I had company. I had a twin sister. I still have my twin sister. She's 33 minutes older than I am, and she lives in Littleton. I share a lot of great stories with her. We had a great time growing up in Colorado, and then my dad moved us to California when I started my 4th grade year. Why do I bring that up? It's important. I had, in the 3rd grade, 1st and 2nd grade, I had already kind of set the precedent for who I was. Class clown, Eddie Haskell. You guys remember Leave It to Beaver. I definitely was not Wally. I definitely was not Theodore, nor was I Clarence. I was Eddie Haskell. I was the guy that always tried to make people laugh. You do your best work in elementary school in the back. You have your good friend here, your good friend there, and they protect you. I walk into the 3rd grade. The very most important thing that day was to find out where my desk was. Front center, where you're sitting, right there. I walk in, and I go, what gives? Friends are in the back still. This is going to be a tough year of performing. I'm not going to have many laughs because I'm in the front row. And then she walked in the room. Mrs. Llewellyn Duncan. One fine-looking woman. Woo! Smoking hot. I could care less about the guys in the back. Front row center. Oh yeah, every day, early. She was in her second year of teaching. You can get an idea how young she was. Well, Mrs. Duncan one day, I was third grade, so I was 9. Started early. So this particular day, anybody in the room ever, and please don't do it now, just for a few minutes, anybody daydream? Look out the window and get caught? I'm looking out the window. It's 1964. And I'm looking out the window and I hear those infamous words, Mr. Hagin. Of course, if it was a higher voice, it was Mrs. Duncan's. Mr. Hagin, are you not paying attention to what I'm saying up here at the chalkboard? I said, I'm sorry. You're in the third grade, 1964, when the teacher asked you a question you didn't think politically correct. You answered honestly. She goes, what, pray tell, were you thinking about? I was thinking about the New York Yankees. And Roger Maris was my first hero. And that's what I was thinking of. And all of a sudden, I hear all the other kids, ooh, he's going to go to the principal's office. James Nason, 6'5", 3,000 pounds easy. Meanest man in the history of the planet. And lo and behold, she didn't send me to the principal's office. Instead, she said, okay, Mr. Hagin, we'll talk about that at a further date. Okay. I go to school the next day, first guy in there, here she comes out that door. One fine-looking woman, Mrs. Llewellyn Duncan. She goes, Mr. Hagin, can you come up to the front desk, please? And then the kids go, ooh, he's going to the principal's office now. She handed me a souvenir New York Yankee program from 1964. And I was stunned. And she says in front of this class, if anybody has baseball mean that much to him, then he needs to have this because my husband Dennis and I went to Yankee Stadium and I want you to have this. And I was stunned. The year went well. She looked well. I had a good year grade-wise, and my dad moved us to California. Fast forward 16 years. I've gone through elementary school, junior high, high school, San Diego State. Now I get my first major league job. I'm on my first road trip. Billy Martin's the manager. I'm with the Oakland A's. Bus pulls up. There's Yankee Stadium. Wow. Everybody walks up for the first time. They go, Babe Ruth played here. Lou Gehrig played here, who you mentioned. Joe DiMaggio, Mickey Mantle, all these Yankee greats. And I walked off, and if you were ever there, you're cordoned off from the fans, and they can say some really wonderful things to you and encourage you to play well against their beloved Yankees that night. You can fill in the blanks. But as the players are walking down, I'm walking in. And I stopped, and I said, I'm going to go buy me a souvenir program. And I'm going to give it to the person who inspired me. So lo and behold, I bought that souvenir program. Now, back in those days, we didn't have cell phones. So you make a call from the hotel, it's a good 15 to 20 bucks. I called Skyline Vista Elementary School in Westminster, and I got these words from the woman. She doesn't teach here anymore. I have not spoken to her in all these years, 16 years. And then I hear this, but she's at Stott Elementary in Arvada. Here's the address. And she gave it to me, and I wrote a thank you note to that woman, who then in turn sent one back to me. And she says, I might as well have teardrops on this letter. I can't believe you remembered me. When I got the Rockies job in 1993, that fine-looking woman was still fine and still teaching at Stott Elementary, and I went and spoke to her class for the few years before she retired. Be thankful to those who inspire you, whether it be a student, whether it be a brother, sister, cousin, mom, dad, whoever it is. Thank God it wasn't James Nason, that principal. I never had to go to see that man. But she meant the world to me. And that's my first message to you. Be thankful. Don't take 16 years to thank somebody who inspired you. It's amazing. So as I go through San Diego State, now I'm going to be a broadcaster. And I told everybody I was going to be in the major leagues at 24. Wouldn't you know it? Made it by 16 days. Goal setting. You know, Jim Carrey, everybody in this room knows who Jim Carrey is. Do you know the story of what he did about writing down goals? His dad was probably funnier than he was, but his dad was a salesman. He had to take care of the family, so he took a back seat and propelled his son, who had about $36, somewhere around that, in his pocket. He had an old beat-up Toyota. He's left Canada. Now he's in Los Angeles. He's driving up Mulholland Drive every night trying to envision success, and it's not coming. He's getting poorer and poorer by the minute. He remembered what his dad said. Write down your goals. It'll be powerful in your life. So what did Jim Carrey do? He pulled out a personal check, dated it 5 years from that particular moment. It was near Thanksgiving time. And he wrote on that check for services rendered to Jim Carrey, $10 million. The man who inspired him died in the 4th year of that 5-year plan that he had. He took that check at his dad's funeral and put it in the casket because he took it out of his wallet. It was all crumpled up, but he put it in there to say, thanks, Dad. You inspired me. The next year, he got more than the $10 million. He was making $20 million a picture. It does work. It does work. My first job, out of college, this guy calls me. I think it's one of my friend's dads. He says, Wayne, we think you're an up-and-coming broadcaster. We know you're green. Would you like to do our first 15 baseball telecasts? And I said, your first 15 telecasts? Who are you? He goes, well, I'm an NBC executive at NBC Sports in New York. My name's Scotty Connell. But we'd like to have you come to ESPN. He didn't even call it ESPN, ESPN. And I said, seriously? And he goes, you're not really buying into this. Well, here's my number, 212. It was in New York City. He goes, think about it, sleep on it, and then call me tomorrow. Oh, I didn't sleep much, but I did call him. And I did the first 15 baseball telecasts for ESPN. That was in July and August of 1979. So that's all in the can. They needed programming. So he says, can you come? He called me again. He says, can you come out and do a sports center? I go, what in the world is a sports center? I was there the night they took air. It was an amazing thing. The only guy who was there, that is still there, was Bob Lee. So I'm there the night they take air. It's like when this building was built. There is sawdust everywhere. The first, and now this is a great trivia question. What was the first live telecast by ESPN at a remote site, meaning to a game or to do an interview with somebody? Wouldn't you know it's Folsom Field in Boulder? Chuck Fairbanks. And they had no audio. And I never knew NBC executives could say the words that they did that night. Oh, man, were they upset. They were angry. So I did the second ever Sports Center. Then they put me in that time slot where nobody watched, like 3 o'clock in the morning. And I'm doing this for a couple of weeks, and I'm like, I was so, not Eddie Haskell-like, but I was so intent on what I wanted to do, so blessed to know what I wanted to do. So I went to Scotty Connell, and I said, I don't want to do this. And he goes, you don't want to do what? I go, I appreciate this opportunity. Don't you see where this is going? I go, it's great, but this isn't what I want to do. He goes, oh, a young guy that knows what he wants to do. What do you want to do? And I said, I want to do Major League Baseball. He goes, good luck. You'll never get a job. Within 12 months, I had my first Major League job. I do believe that the heart does push you to achieve. And I told that guy. So years later, Scotty Connell sent messages to me. Been watching. Congratulations, you knew what you wanted to do. By the way, Chris Berman is the guy that took my place. He was doing Hartford weekend sports, which is about 45 minutes down the road without traffic. And I only asked him one thing, 10% of whatever you make. Never got a dime. Not a single dime. But I had the opportunity to be there when they first started. So it's a great thing for me to look back on. It was a wonderful experience, but baseball was it. baseball was it, because I got to go do a game. Can you imagine going to your work every day, and every day is different? You do 162 games, those games better be different, because it's long. It's a long season. And so I broke in, and Billy Martin, anybody in the room remember Billy Martin, the great Billy Martin? Oh my gosh, one of the craziest managers / baseball players that ever lived. My first night on the road was in Minneapolis. We're playing in Bloomington at the old Metropolitan Stadium. Can you imagine? I was there before the Metrodome. It was the coldest place ever. And all I remember in the middle of the night was this. And I thought it was my door. So being the journalist that I was, being nosy, I opened the door. And there's Billy Martin, who, soaking wet, was 150 pounds, probably about 5'8". And he's knocking on the door across the hallway from me of Cliff Johnson, who is 6'5", 230 pounds, a rancher, one of the players on the team for the Oakland A's, but he's a rancher from San Antonio, Texas. First night on the road, I hear that knock. I creak open my door. I hear a lot of other doors opening. And Billy Martin is telling Cliff Johnson, "You get out here, Johnson. If you're not dressed, put on some slacks. Get out here." He's mad at him because he called a team meeting. He just didn't like that. Remember, it's 2 o'clock in the morning. Billy's had a few by now. So I'll never forget, Cliff Johnson walked out as big as he was, and he says, "Skip." And he always had a toothpick in his mouth. He goes, "Skip, what's up, man? What gives?" And Billy, looking up at him, as tall as he was, screaming at the top of his lungs, "You can't call a team meeting." He goes, "It is no big deal." And I'll never forget, "I'm so mad at you," Billy Martin says to him, I could bite your head off." Cliff Johnson put his arm down on his shoulder. He had a cowboy hat on, almost knocked it off. Put this one on the other shoulder. He says, "Skip, if you did that, you'd have more brains in your stomach than you got in your head." I closed that door and said, "Whoa, okay, fine." The first night in the major leagues, and that's how I got, well, another year goes by. I'll tell you about perception. In the business world, you have perceptions, and oftentimes they're proven wrong. Oakland Coliseum day game. Wednesday or Thursday, couldn't begin to tell you. But my job in those days as the number 3 guy between two legends, Bill King and Lon Simmons in the Bay Area, my job was to do the pre- and post-game show. I get an inning here, an inning there. But the post-game show was big. Well, that particular 9th inning, the Milwaukee Brewers scored 5,000 runs and came back and beat the Rockies. Or excuse me, the A's. They run together sometimes. The Milwaukee Brewers beat him that day. So I do the show, and I'm adjacent to the clubhouse, and I hear this pounding, screaming, bad words, everything. And I know who it is. It's Billy Martin. And I'll never forget walking to the front. He is taking a baseball bat and hitting the wall as his coaches take the pictures off. He beat the toilet to a draw. He knocked the TV set that was up above his office desk. He put the bat right through that. And I said, "Oh my goodness, he takes losing extremely hard. What a competitor." No, he had asked the A's for a $100,000 loan to pay back his IRS back taxes, and they said no. That's why he was doing that. So perception isn't always reality. So you do learn things as it goes along. To be able to work as I did in the Bay Area, and then to climb the ladder, because you go from a number 3, you go up in the ranks to the number 2, and then you finally get the number 1 job. And I got that here in Colorado. And I'll never forget the 2 guys who told me to take this job. I was offered 4 jobs in 3 days. In those days, jobs were hard to come by. They still are in baseball. You got to remember, there are 30 teams. So take a play-by-play announcer for TV and a play-by-play announcer for radio, and my math's pretty good because of Mrs. Duncan. That's 60 jobs. It's a narrow field. And when you get in, very few people quit. They rarely walk away. Jack Buck did the St. Louis Cardinals for 47 years. Harry Carey, if he could have lived, would still be doing the Chicago Cubs. He'd still be saying, hey, 6 of my best friends just came in the booth and they're all named Bud. Somebody brought him a six-pack. Those are the type of people that get those jobs and keep those jobs forever. So when I came to Colorado, Vince Scully and Jack Buck were the only two guys I asked. I said, what would you take? I'll tell you the other offers. The Boston Red Sox, Westerner and Provincial Boston, probably not. Baltimore, probably not. Angels, Los Angeles market, could be. This is where I wanted to be. So I come to a state that is, I claim my own, and I'm told if they have a good year, they'll draw 1.7 million. We were 17,000 shy of 4.5 million that first year. It was ridiculous. And had there not been a strike the following year in '94, we would have broken those records. It was unbelievable what we got to experience here. I got to call Eric Young's first home run, the first Rocky to hit a home run. 3-2 pitch, Kent Bottenfield threw it up to him. He homered. Larry Walker was on the Expos, the other team, and he remembers how that stadium shook. And I remember the night before, because I had great faith, and I said, at 2 o'clock in the morning, I had my parents come out from California. They're in my home in Highlands Ranch, and I just couldn't sleep. And I said, just a small little prayer, I said, if something big happens tomorrow, please let me be equal to the task. And he spoke through me, man. It was awesome. I said, and the snow off Pikes Peak is falling off at the decibel level of Mile High Stadium. And people around the country like that for some weird reason. But that's what came out. I'm not sure exactly how that happened, but it did happen. And Eric Young and I are close to this very day. It's a wonderful experience to share something like that. He's the first guy up for the team. Nobody even knows who he is. They didn't know who we were. But we were all in it together. And they stood and they roared for their number 21 in those days. And then we later came to know him as EY. But what a great experience. And then came the biggest transition in my life, the most difficult, and maybe this has happened to some of you, and we all have to work our way through it. But in 2002, I've already had my 10 years with the Rockies. The St. Louis Cardinals approached me on the field at Coors Field and said, would you be interested in taking Jack Buck's place? Now, Jack Buck was about as big a guy in life as anybody I've ever met. Just an amazing man. And he died in June of that year, so this is September. And I said, absolutely not. I'm where I want to be. I don't want to leave Colorado. Well, at least fly to St. Louis when the season's over and talk to us. And sure enough, I did. It's the old story of you take a chance. Well, a lot of prayer was put into it, a lot of talking with family. I have 2 boys, and they were very much involved in that discussion. And as it turned out, I was supposed to go to St. Louis. And I'll never forget getting in the car in Kencara Valley where we lived, and I'm driving with my son, my wife, and the other son. We're going to fly to St. Louis. We're moving there, and I'm driving, and the farther east I got, the less I saw those mountains, and it bothered me. It was really tough to leave Colorado. But I went to St. Louis, and all I heard that year was, going to be tough shoes to fill. And I said, I can only be the best I can be. I can't be anybody else. And that's one thing I learned from Vince Scully as a broadcaster. He says, the only thing that you bring different than anybody else is that you walk in that door and you close that door. You bring you. And I'm telling you, as a major league broadcaster, I don't know how it is in your business, but it took a good 5 years of doing it every single day to realize who I was. And would I be comfortable with invoking a sense of humor on the air? Could I make you laugh? Could I tell you the truth? See, today, there's too much homerism going on. I don't like it too much. I hear broadcasts locally where the ball goes foul for the other team and the guy's going, go foul, go foul. Come on. Tell it like it is. The audience is mature and they get it. Respect them. Respect their talent. And another thing that happens is that sometimes you don't tell the audience that there's a no-hitter going on. You think you're in some kind of stratosphere where you have to be superstitious like the players. Oh, please. If you tuned in, the score's 10-0. It's the 9th inning of a no-hit bid, which happened recently, and I don't keep you interested. I don't tell you there's a no-hitter going. Like, let me tell you one thing. I learned the hard way. Mike DeJean, great guy, big dude, right? Hunter, fisherman. We're doing the game at Coors Field. Now, what I found out later is that the bullpen tuned in the radio broadcast. They're listening to the broadcast as they're watching the game. I didn't know that until this specific day. It was the first week of August, 2001. Now, to me, I research games. You have to research games. I'm like, I believe Al Michaels, who once said to me, I don't want to ever get caught not knowing. So we did hours and hours of preparation. If the game was good, you didn't use it. Well, I used a lot. There were a lot of bad games. You know, you're in June and you're 15 games out of first place, and you've got 3 more months to go. It's a little rough. But I'll never forget this one day. I've never shared this story before. That day, I had mentioned on the air. Now, this is the importance of superstition in baseball. There shouldn't be superstition in baseball, but you can't deny it. It's there. It's August, so it's 2 months ready to go in the season. We've played 4 months, and not one single Marlins catcher that year had homered. So I just mentioned it. Isn't that odd that a catcher who plays every day has not hit a home run? Pow! Right when I was done speaking. I go, that's amazing, you know. But I just play it off and whatever. The Rockies win the game. Drive out the DIA. Get on the airplane. I'm just standing there talking to George Frazier, not thinking much of anything until Mike DeJean walks by me and goes, "What did you jinx us today?" And I think he's kidding. And I knew it was his birthday, so I said, "Hey, happy birthday." And he goes, "Well, why'd you jinx us?" He yelled at me like that. I went, "Jinx you? How did I jinx you?" "You were talking about it, and that's why it happened." And I said right to his face, I said, "I didn't throw the pitch. I had nothing to do with it. I described what I see." And he got so angry. They had to pull him away from me. He was like, I mean, he couldn't even talk. I mean, and I'm like, God, there is something to this. Those things happen rarely, but when they do, you never forget it. So you share it with an audience like this tonight. Baseball broadcasters have one criteria. You. I owe it to you, the listeners. I don't do a broadcast to make a player happy. Larry Walker asked me one day, "Why'd you get so excited when Sammy Sosa just hit 3 home runs against us in a game?" And I said, "Because he hit 3 home runs in a game." When I called the Hideo no-hitter, I gave him his just due. I didn't go, "And it's a no-hitter and the Rockies lose." I mean, it was baseball history at Coors Field. It was exceptional. And the crowd that night began with 50,000. It was down to a precious 8 maybe at the end. They were standing and cheering for him because that's what I believed in this audience. They love baseball history. It's awesome. And remember this, I shared it with the group earlier. When you think about how long Major League Baseball has been around, this state was founded in 1876. That's the same year that the National League started play. That's how long baseball has been with us, a long time. Fighting Indians in Montana, the Battle of the Little Bighorn, all took place in late June of 1876, and they're playing baseball in the East. And it took us a long time to get Major League Baseball, but thank God we did. I think you guys are great fans. I think it's a wonderful mixture here. I'm glad that we had Dick Monfort here. I came and saw him speak. It was exceptional. And I hope that you get what you deserve, and that is a World Series someday and a World Series victory. They're hard to come by. Just ask Ernie Banks. He never got to do it. But the point that I want to make is one thing that we do a lot of. And I tell kids this all the time. You ever get in a car and you're constantly looking in that rearview mirror? Don't look in the rearview mirror. Don't ever look back. You know, I never got upset about things I didn't do. I got upset at the things I didn't do correctly. And I do that every day. I never had a perfect broadcast. As hard as I tried, every time for 4,500 games, I tried to have the perfect game. But the intention was there to have the perfect game. It just never happened. And another thing I tell kids, if you're young and you're starting out, I remember this young lady right here. Can I guess Katie?
You're so close.
Okay. I remember meeting her down in the parking lot. We were all leaving with your friends, and she said she'd be here, so thank you for coming. And I remember she raised her hand and was asking Joe Ellis, the president of the Broncos, what can I do in my career at a young age? How can I get going? And there are so many things that we can share, so many things that we've learned through the adventure of life, the streets that we've taken, the avenues we've taken, and the dead ends we've hit. It all happens like that. But the thing for me to tell you is to go through it and not be afraid and achieve. You will achieve, but expect it. Expect it deeply. That's the great players that I was around a lot of great players. Ricky Henderson, Carlton Fisk. Carlton Fisk had the greatest line that I ever saw. He says, commitment knows no off season. So I'm going to tell you a little story about somebody. Okay, you're all the general managers. We're going to change sports to football. It's not on my sheet, but I'm going to act like it is. You've heard of the Combine Report? So you're all general managers, and I'm going to tell you about this quarterback. Can't throw a tight spiral, not built big enough to handle being hit hard by tackles and guards and linebackers. Everything he does is slow. He ran a 5.2 40. Peyton Manning ran a 4.8, so it gives you an idea. This guy was really slow. And this guy was slow in taking the football and taking the three-step drop, throwing the passes. These people on this piece of paper in the Combine Report, everybody believed. But the one thing he did, you remember Brian Griese, quarterback for the Broncos, was at University of Michigan. They won the national championship. This guy was 2 years behind him. He was a sophomore backup. His name, Tom Brady. So if you take out the year he was injured, and you really look at 15 years of being an NFL quarterback, he took his team to the Super Bowl 7 times, almost 50% of the time. And he won 5 of them? But wait a minute. This report says you suck. How can it be? And Brian Griese and I did a thing together at the Air Force Academy called the National Character and Leadership Symposium. They've done it for 24 years. And I simply asked Brian Griese, it was no setup, it just happened. I said, what can you tell us? There's 4,000 cadets, young people. The Super Bowl's just been played. So I did that Combine Report and nobody raised their hand except Brian Griese. I'll take that quarterback because he knew who I was talking about. You know what he said? I'll never forget this. You think about this when you're going about your business, when you're trying to succeed in life, whether it be in business, mom, dad, whatever it is, brother, sister, friend, do it 100%. Because Brian Griese said, I watched a sophomore quarterback do more things when no one was watching than anybody I've ever seen in my life. He goes, I'm a senior. I'm the guy. We win the national championship. And every time he's out there working his fanny off a little bit extra, I'm looking to see if the coach is watching. Is that why he's doing it? Coach was never watching. So think about that in school, at home, in your workplace. What do you do when no one's watching? Well, Tom Brady is a great example of this. I can give you all kinds of notes about players, stats, great ballparks, great teams. I can give you all of that. But the one thing I've learned in my professional life that I would like to share with you and leave with you tonight before I take questions. It's so important. It's the biggest thing I can possibly say to you. When you die, you can have piles of money stacked to the ceiling. Don't let that be an index of one success, because the size of your funeral will ultimately depend on the weather. Go through it with character. People will remember character. They will not remember how much money you had. God bless you, and thank you for having me.
Okay, I'm going to ask 3 quick questions, and we'll open up to the group. Before our get-together here, you shared a story about walking the field with somebody. Would you mind sharing that with the group?
Well, I'll tell you what, Dennis, if you would be so kind, just the one from that game. Yeah, that one in your right hand. Just hand it to the audience. What happened is the greatest moment that ever happened in my baseball career had nothing to do with a win-loss. I never saw a player hit 4 home runs in a game, but I've seen 3. I've had the World Series. I've been on that winning flight home when you party like crazy. I mean, all of the great things. I've been to the White House to see the president after a World Series win. I've been in the I've actually been in the parade, believe it or not. They put broadcasters in there, and you're waving like you're a player, like you did something. Yeah, right. You did nothing, Hagin. Well, but you just talked about it, which is true. But they also gave you a World Series ring. I've been able to fly with the Blue Angels, 45 minutes of sheer terror and excitement. I've had so many wonderful moments because of the game of baseball, but my greatest moment ever is something I'm sharing with you is a baseball bat given to me by a dear friend of mine at San Diego State University. Because of the story of 9/11 and the time, back in 2001, we were on the road when that happened, the Rockies. We were in Arizona to play the Diamondbacks, and then we were going to finish the road trip in San Diego. We didn't play those games until the season ended, and they extended it a week. So instead of Tony Gwynn playing his last major league game in San Francisco, the script changed, and I had a chance to watch it and call it his last major league game. A dear friend in 2001, and he gave me that bat that day. And what Brian would like me to share with you is that it was 5 hours before the game. There was nobody there except Tony and myself. And he got up. He had a tank top on, shorts, and sandals. And at that time, if you remember Tony Gwynn, a little out of shape. Might be a little bit more like a Babe Ruth look. And he put on this straw hat, and he goes, well, I'm going to go take my final walk. So I ask of you, if there's a sports hero that you've had somewhere along the line, can you imagine that person saying to you, would you like to go on the walk with me? And that's what happened that day. I went to right field, center field, left field, third base, home plate, 2 hours, just listened. My wife wouldn't agree with that. You never listen. But anyway, I listened to his whole story, and it was a wonderful experience. So I'm sharing that bat with you because that's what he gave me that day. It was a very special day.
Do you believe that big salaries are helping or hurting sports?
Well, as long as advertisers and networks continue to pay the big money to have it on television in particular, I think it will continue. There are certain things that I disagree with. I went through many strikes. My very first year, I came to the Oakland Coliseum. They said, we're not playing today. I go, what do you mean we're not playing? Did I have the schedule wrong? No, we're on strike. 50 games lost. Then 1994 was another strike. Of course, we didn't have a World Series. So when they finally agreed, what I think every owner should do is abide by it. And not all of them have abided by that. And I think you need to. You need to abide by it, follow the rules. Everybody wins in that particular situation.
What's the best game that you've ever covered, and why?
Well, I've called 5 no-hitters, and that's pretty exciting because every pitch means something. I would have to say the first game for the Colorado Rockies because there were 80,227 people at Mile High Stadium. Mark McIntosh, who at the time was with Channel 4, could you stand up, Mark? A dear friend, great guy who wanted to come tonight, and I appreciate that. Terrific individual. You remember the emotion. It was amazing to have that many people. And again, to not even know who Eric Young was, and he hits this home run, crazy. By the way, Rockies never had a shutout at home that entire season. Yet they took an 11-0 lead to the 9th inning of that game. Just to give you an idea, they never had one the entire year, but that first game they almost did. They won 11-4.
Right. So before I open it up to everyone for questions, so Mark McIntosh, we just met. I was hiking in Vail a couple of weekends ago, and we're getting up to the top of the mountain, and we've got our hands on our legs like this because we're out of breath and out of shape. And this guy just goes right past us, and he has this Bad Daddy's Burger backpack. I was like, who has a Bad Daddy's Burger backpack? That must be a cool guy. So we struck up a conversation, and he helped lead us to the top of the mountain. And since then, we've had great conversation. And just funny how you meet people in life just by saying hello. And next time, if you'd bring a bottle of water for me, I'd appreciate it. Just saying, because I'm a little out of shape. But anyway, so let's open it up to the crowd. What questions do we have? Yes, back here. What is your favorite sport other than baseball?
Good question. I would have to say football. I love football. And Mark might remember this. In 1998, when the Broncos went back-to-back and won the Super Bowls, beating Green Bay the first time, then Atlanta, I'll never forget a line that I heard that particular night where they said, when they beat the Falcons, remember Dan Reeves was the coach? It's the first game plan he ever came up with so the Broncos would win. He was the opposing coach. But anyway, we digress. That same year, I want to tell you how I found out John Elway was going to retire. I don't know how you found out. But I was doing a speaking engagement similar to the duties that Brian conducts tonight. And I was going to introduce him, but this is well before the event. We're talking, and I said, gosh, I'm hearing rumors that you might be quitting. And he looked me straight in the eye and says, I am. I said, why? You got Terrell Davis, man. You got Rod Smith. You got Shannon Sharp. You got it all. He goes, since I was a little kid, I have been tackled, whether I saw him coming or not. And every time since I was a little kid, until my professional ranks, playing with the Broncos, I could tell my body to move that football. 2 weeks ago, I broke a rib. I'm done. And I was so shocked, and he followed through. That was his reason for retiring, because he couldn't tell the body to move the football. I said, wow, he went out the right way.
Yeah. So true. Next. Yes. Question is, can you share a story about a moment on the bus ride that was very inspirational or life-changing in some way?
I do remember when Brett Saberhagen was signed as a free agent on July 31st of the 1995 season. And the Rockies won the first ever wild card that year. And at 39,000 feet, 25 players going crazy. They were so excited because they felt they had been fortified. What we got was a mixture of goods that weren't just as good as they used to be with Kansas City. So that happened. I do remember the euphoria of that. But I do remember when the Cardinals won the World Series. And I remember it was a simple thing that they had never done all year. In football, you play 16 games. Baseball, 162. So it's very unusual when a team, and it was a team of veterans, they turned it on. They were very average. They were 83 and 79 that year, which is pretty close to average. But the first playoff game they played against San Diego, I'll never forget, Jim Edmonds, who wasn't an outspoken guy, but he said, I'm going to do a team ball like they do in football. And he did a team ball. And for some weird reason, something clicked with that team. And as average as they were, they turned it on and played like the New York Yankees of 1927 and won the World Series. So I think there's some, it's childish, it's juvenile at times, and it could also go the other way. But in that sense, it was a very positive thing. Yeah. So, and there were a lot of parties at 39,000 feet back in the day.
Okay, next question, Nicole.
Do you have a player that you might predict, or it's not obvious to everyone, that you think is going to just rise to the top, but hasn't, and if so, do you have a way of, like, is there a way of predicting, as many years as you've been in this industry, having somebody just because of their will and their dedication?
So the question is there a relatively unknown player right now that you think has the potential to really rise to the top? And is there some type of mechanism or something that you use to predict that for others? Great.
Well, I would have said Aaron Judge, but it wouldn't have been fair. The New York Yankees, my goodness, the guy's a rookie and does what he does at the All-Star game was ridiculous. I think I could have said that answer to the question a couple of years ago about Nolan Arenado, simply because not his offense, but his defense. The guy comes to play on both sides, and that's awesome. I will say this, though. The one guy that has surpassed everything that I expected of him, and I had high expectations, is Albert Pujols. I'll tell you why. Go back to June of 1999, draft day. It's the biggest moment in a young man's life. It truly is. And he had a girlfriend, and he was going to be married on New Year's Day the following January. So she comes to his apartment just outside Kansas City to congratulate him because she knows the draft is happening and he's going to be drafted. He was promised by Tampa that he was going to be a #1 pick. When she got there, he didn't answer the door. So she had a key. She opened the door, walked in. She found Albert Pujols, who just hit his 600th home run. Very few have ever hit 600 home runs. He was crying with his face head down in the pillow. I hate baseball. I quit. And she said, and this is the best thing to remember because I've got a wife like this. She goes, oh, so you're telling me we're going to get married on January 1st and you're going to be a powder and a baby now? She goes, give it 1 year. And if you do not make it to the major leagues, if you don't like baseball anymore, she really gave it to him. You have to know her to love her. She's an amazing woman. She basically told her husband-to-be, get it in gear, prove Major League Baseball wrong, tell the Cardinals that they were wrong, that they selected you in the 13th round, which means 400 players were selected before him. And here's a guy who thought he was the greatest player in the world, and yet Major League Baseball slapped him in the face. Well, he gave it a year and a half. Made it to the major leagues, was Rookie of the Year. He's won the MVP. He's won a couple of World Series, over 600 home runs. Let me just suffice to say that Albert Pujols, in his first 7 years of baseball, with the eternal chip on his shoulder, did better numbers than Babe Ruth, Lou Gehrig, Willie Mays, any of them. He's on his way to the Hall of Fame, and he can thank one person. He can thank his wife, because he was willing to quit that day. So what I've learned, Brian, is that somebody has a chip on his shoulder. If you have a young kid, teenage kid, whatever it is, the easiest way to get rid of a chip on the shoulder is a pat on the back.
You're giving me more golden nuggets, and I don't have my pen. I can't write all these down. Let's finish up with 2 questions. You had a question.
So you mentioned all of these games in a season. There's a lot. Day in and day out, perhaps it's a different game. How do you fuel that stamina through all those seasons with a lot of games?
Given the amount of games and all the practices and everything, how do you maintain the stamina for what you do, or maybe what the players even do?
It's a great question. As a broadcaster, I can only answer for me. It's a routine every day. Every now and then, I'd switch it up. If I arrived at the ballpark an hour later than 3 o'clock, if I got there at 4, sometimes 4:30, I felt like I went on vacation because it's an everyday process. For the players, that's why they have select days off. I think it's important. I think it's especially important here at altitude. You know, I talked to Buddy Black about that. I said, you know, and I don't know Jan, who for many years pitched batting practice for the Rockies. He's given up more home runs than anybody in this room. But But I think he'd agree with me that there's something to the altitude. I remember re-entry for me coming back from a West Coast road trip. Man, I could feel it. It just didn't feel tip-top. And, you know, I'm a native, but I felt it. And I wonder what happens to these players at times. And I sometimes wonder if, see, the players get there too early. Would you agree? They get there now at like 1 o'clock in the afternoon. If you're at 2 o'clock, you're late. And it's peer pressure. But the reality is, I think they should show up at 5 o'clock after a road trip and no batting practice. Because every day it's like, I remember Jim Leland, 1 year he spent as the manager of the Rockies. You know what he said? The team is a professional hitting team at batting practice, can't do a damn thing during the game. That's what he said. Am I right? He goes, I don't get it, but I think there's a fatigue factor. So as a broadcaster, what I would do, we're out of it 20 games by June 15th. What I did was every day I prepared like it was the game of the week. I didn't act like it was a Rockies game. I wanted to make it more like a game of the week where I could find something interesting to talk about. So if I found it interesting, at least you'd feel my passion, and hopefully you'd stay tuned and listen. Because it was hard some of those days, because we didn't always have a great team. But nobody does. Remember this in baseball. Last thing for you, Bryce, promise. You win 100 games, you are deemed one of the great teams, not just that year, but one of the great teams in history. You win 100 games. In baseball, that means you lost 62 times. Think about that. How many times you walk away defeated. So that's why you never give up.
Love it. Love it. Yeah, let's give that a round of applause. That's a good one. Okay, last question.
So you mentioned earlier, you're talking about putting family first. How do you maintain a successful career and family develops?
So our question is, you mentioned putting family first. How do you maintain a successful career while also balancing family as well?
Well, they took a back seat for a long time. And what Brian was referring to was an article in the Denver Post when I had to walk away from the game. It just was too much. I had a son who was having difficult times in high school here in Denver, actually in Castle Rock. We lived in Bell Mountain. My wife's here for the first time in our lives since we've been married. I'll be married 31 years in December. And that was the first time we were ever, oh yeah. She'll say it's because I was gone half the time, and that's probably true. But she lived in Bell Mountain with my 2 boys who gave her everything that she could handle in high school, especially the oldest. We had a difficult time with him. So here I am fathering him over the phone from New York City. I'm living in Manhattan by myself for 4 years, and it was difficult. So a lot of prayer, a lot of talking, and then one day on a subway I said, this has been a blessing to be in New York. You're supposed to be at the top of your game. The absolute ultimatum came down and said, go home. And I obeyed and I went home. And I've been happy ever since. And I will tell you that son is now 26 and he's awesome. And he gave me a grandson. Little Declan, I love him.
Let's give Wayne a round of applause. Okay, for those who have been here before, you know that I like to do my 10 golden nuggets, things that I took from his talk. They're not always exactly written down the way he says them, but I get that license. Number 1, when plan A fails, go put 100% of your effort into plan B. Number 2, it wasn't just the thrill of calling the game. It was an ambassadorship. How many times do each of us need to look maybe in our own professional lives that, yes, we're doing something, but you're an ambassador of sorts. And what are you communicating out there in the world? Number 3, you are looking at someone who has never worked a day in his life as I had passion for what I was doing. Do each of you have passion? We all have tough days, right? But do you have passion where you're getting up and getting excited to maybe go make a difference in the world? Number 4, be grateful, especially for the ones who inspired and helped you. Number 5, send thank you notes, especially handwritten ones. I can't believe you remembered me. Mrs. Duncan. And it's so... Well, I can't say that. I can't. I'm just the host. You can say that about Mrs. Duncan. I cannot say that about Mrs. Duncan. Sure, she was a lovely lady. God bless Mrs. Duncan. Okay, number 6. Every night, drive up your own Mulholland Drive, just like Jim Carrey, envisioning your success. It does work. I got a lot of poetic license on that one, so you're okay with it, though. I can tell. Number 7, I do believe that the heart does push you to achieve. You know, so often in life, we're removing this thing called the heart, and it's all about business, or it's about this or that, or whatever. Put the heart back into things. It really does make a positive difference. Number 8, perception isn't always reality. You do learn things as you go along. And I would add to that, if you're not learning things as you go along, that's a problem. We're all going to go through good stuff. We're all going to have bad stuff and everything in between. But try to learn the lessons as you go through it and try to apply them in some way. Number 9, when people get in, he said broadcasting, they rarely walk away. You know, I think it's oftentimes in our culture today, we're constantly pressing the easy button. It's easy to walk away. It's easy not to go ahead and mend that relationship or have that tough conversation. Tell someone you love them, whatever it might be. I really encourage all of you not just to walk away. It's so easy in society today to do. Number 10, this is where I wanted to be. This is my state. And he was talking about Colorado, and we all understand that, and we love Colorado as well. But what's the state that you should personally be in? Could be a mental state, could be a physical state, whatever it might be. Find out what your state is and plant some seeds and some roots there. And I've never done this before, but we're going to have number 11. We're going to break the 10 golden nuggets, because you had so many. You had like 5 when I was up here just now. So number 11, go through it and don't be afraid. Commitment knows no off season. Let that one soak in. Are you really committed, or you just want to be in the off season? Okay. So, our upcoming events on August 10th, we have Tamara Banks, Emmy Award-winning journalist and CEO of Taz Media. Can't wait for her to come share some of the stories. I mean, this woman goes into some very challenging places around the world. You know, you mentioned Haiti and others, and she's going onto the front lines and creating great personal stories. So I encourage all of you to come to that. September 14th, we have Rick White, president of the Atlantic League of Baseball. I don't know why we have a baseball theme going on here, but it's just really working, so we'll just keep it up. October 12th, Margaret Kelly, former president and CEO of RE/MAX. She took RE/MAX from a small shop and helped to grow it into a global concern. And especially as a woman and going through all what she was going through, she wasn't even a real estate broker. She just went into RE/MAX and helped to grow this company into just this massive organization, and it's just awesome. November 9th, George Brockler, District Attorney for Colorado's 18th Judicial District. He's going to come in and talk about the theater shooting in Aurora and hopefully bring some jurors with him on that. December 14th, Charlie McNeil. He's Chairman and CEO of Next Gen Resources. He's all about clean coal. And whether you believe in clean coal or not, show up and learn about it, and I hope you can ask him some tough questions. February 8th, we have Daryl Scott. He's the international speaker and author. He founded Rachel's Challenge. If you don't know about Rachel's Challenge, his daughter was one of the first to be killed at Columbine. And he took all that tragedy and that hurt, and he turned it into something very positive to impact others. March 8th, Lloyd Lewis, President and CEO of ARC Thrift Stores. I love Lloyd's story. He was in corporate America. He had a child that was born and had Down syndrome, and he went and became CEO of ARC Thrift Stores. And a good amount of their employees are people with disabilities that they hire and create jobs for, and it's just an awesome, awesome program. So really recommend you come and listen to him. Also wanted to remind you about the Mountains of Opportunity TV show. We get to do a show on any entrepreneur or business or nonprofit, for-profit in Colorado that we want to. And so we're going around with a TV crew from Comcast, and they're on CNN and Headline News and Fox and all the other ones. And anyway, they're just these great stories about entrepreneurs who have a product or service, their employees, and kind of their journey that they're going through. And so really recommend, if you have any great stories, please share them with us, because we're looking for more stories on that level. And then I also wanted to mention that Ryan Cohen, who comes here often, is Ryan here? Is he gone? Oh, is he over there? Do you want to come up right quick and tell us about Stella's and all the free drinks you're going to have for everybody tonight? just really appreciate that about you. Let's give him a round of applause. Bring him up to the front.
We have the same name as well. Great. Thanks. Hi, everyone. My name is Brian Cohen. I'm one of the owners of Stella's on 16th downstairs. We have 2 bands live. There's about 500 people in the plaza right now. It's free to the public. The second band is starting in about 5 minutes. It's the Grayson Earhart Band. So please come downstairs after you're done with Brian's function, and we'd love to have you guys hang out with us and listen to some great music and have some great drinks and food. Thank you, guys. Thanks.
Again, at the Opportunity Coalition, we always want to try to promote opportunity for all. So really appreciate that you're downstairs and making that work. Again, thank you all for being here, and hope to see you next time. Thank you.